Hello, I'm Amie Kaufman.
And I'm Patrick Ness, here to talk to you. No. Hi, my friends. Before we kick off, let's, as we always do, begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. They were the first storytellers here. They are still storytellers here today on this unceded land. And I pay my respects to elders past and present. To today's storyteller, Patrick Ness, I made a list, is the New York Times bestselling author of many, many books, and we will be talking about most of them tonight. He has won Carnegie Medals plural, the Kate Greenaway Medal, an Olivier Award, the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize, the Book Trust Teenage Prize, the Costa Children's Book Award, and many other things besides. He is an author, he is a screenwriter, he is a human, and tonight we are going to take a peek inside his brain. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you.
So our plan this evening is I am going to ask Patrick many and wide-ranging questions about his books without spoiling them. I'm going to walk a very careful line. After we're done will come the moment when I say, does anyone in the audience have a question? I tell you this now so that you are not surprised when the moment comes. You are all prepared to thrust your hands in the air. After that, our booksellers down the back are the Chestnut Tree, and Patrick will be available to sign your purchases. So Patrick, before we get to the books, I want to start at the very beginning because I always love to ask people this. Mm-hmm. Do you have an early memory of storytelling, of you as a storyteller when you were small?
Small, I mean, yes, except storytelling is an active verb and an active noun and concept in that it implies a listener. Mm-hmm. And most of my writing when I was very young was private.
Right.
So I didn't share it unless it was in a class. And so I always looked forward to the creative writing assignments in class. But I tried not to make a fuss because I was slightly embarrassed because nobody in my town ever did anything like write a book.
Right.
I am the most famous person from my high school. And that's not a high bar. And but I loved it when we had the opportunity to do it in school, and I would look for opportunities to do it even when it wasn't. And this is true. I tell the story a lot, but I wrote a lab report on, I believe it was on covalent bonding. I don't remember anything about covalent bonding, but I turned the lab report in chemistry class into an allegory about divorce, about bonding and breaking apart. And I turned it into a short story, and the chemistry teacher read it out loud, without my permission. So those are my memories of it. I thought, I've got this philosophy. Are there any writers here? Any wannabe writers? Any actual writers? I did not say that. That is a slip of the tongue. Because actual writing, you're not an actual writer if you've been published. That is an absolute incorrect thing I've said. Are there any writers here? Full stop. Great. Because I've got a philosophy that is real writers don't write, they write anyway. I didn't think anybody would publish a book of mine. I wrote one anyway. I didn't think anybody would film a screenplay of mine. I wrote one anyway. Real writers don't write, they write anyway. So write anyway. And you'd be surprised at what happens.
Yeah, I always feel like I'm a bad interviewee when someone says, why do you write? This sort of blank, well, what else would I do? I write because I write.
Yeah, I mean, I can't sing.
Also that.
Yeah.
So, staying with young Patrick for a
Okay.
moment, we'll let you grow up in a moment, insofar as you ever have, I promise. Do you have particular books that you remember early on that sort of wormed their way inside you?
Well, it's interesting because the very first book I remember owning and experiencing, and I'm sure it was the book that taught me to read, was Richard Scarry's Picture Book Dictionary.
Ah, yes.
And Richard Scarry's amazing.
Yes.
Apparently a real crabby old guy, which is not uncommon. But I loved them because they were like cats in aprons. And there was an animal that was also a butcher, and you think, what nightmare is going on there?
Right.
And but I had a Richard Scarry play set, and you could build a little Richard Scarry village out of it, and so that he is the number one first of mine that I remember reading, and then I have always absolutely said, and this is absolutely true, that I am a writer because of two women, because of Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume.
Yes.
And those two women are why I'm a writer. They were why I was a reader, and I owe the world to them. And I met Judy Blume, and you write books and you write. I've been lucky enough to write a couple of movies and for television, so I've met famous people, and I'd like to think I'm pretty cool. And the only time that
We've all got one though.
Yeah. Well, the only time I've completely lost my shit are when I met Judy Blume. I'm sorry, I couldn't see a thing. That's why I was cleaning this. When I met Judy Blume and when I met John Taylor from Duran Duran.
Yeah.
And it's because nobody is as important as someone who's important to you when you're 12.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you had an airport encounter just recently with a musician. I saw you say on Threads.
Oh, I did. Oh God, who was it?
Was it Neil Finn?
It was Neil Finn. Yes, it was a hotel. Yeah. And Neil Finn, now this is absolutely true. I'm not just sucking up because it's the Antipodes. Credit House was the very first concert I ever saw in Seattle, Washington, at the Bumbershoot Labor Day Festival. It was free concerts you could go to, and Credit House was there, the very first one. I only could stay for like 2 songs because I had a strict curfew. I'm a lifetime member of the Credit House fan club. Mm-hmm. I have seen Neil Finn, Credit House, and the Finn brothers in maybe 10 times live. And so I saw him in the lobby of my Wellington hotel. And it was like, it's like I don't know what happened. I couldn't stop staring at him, and I couldn't stop walking. And I walked over, and I didn't even stop walking. I said, "Your music's meant the world to me." And
drive by.
Yeah, pretty much. And he said, "Oh, thank you very much. Nice to meet you." And so I would have regretted it forever if I hadn't. So.
Look, I take great comfort from the fact that the subsequent occasions on which I have met Kim Stanley Robinson, he doesn't remember the first time we met, and the absolute meltdown that took place in that signing line. All right, so I want to read you a favourite quote of mine.
Okay.
We're getting a bit nerdy here, but
That's no problem.
They said I could ask whatever I wanted, so here we are. This is a quote from J.R.R. Tolkien. He said, "A story grows like a seed in the dark from the foliage of the mind, from all that has been seen or thought or read, long forgotten down into the depths. Doubtless there is much to choose from, as with a gardener, what one throws on one's personal compost heap." And I've always loved this idea that we curate our own compost heaps, that we choose, to some extent, the people and the places and the books and the music and the fuel and the stuff that we put in.
He only managed 4 novels, though.
He did.
The rest of it was just made up encyclopedias
just appendices
and stuff.
All the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. They were bangers, though. You got to give him that. They have stood the test of time.
They have stood the test of time.
The
Hobbit movies will not.
Oh.
But
look, had we more time, my TED talk on what went wrong with the Hobbit movies. But
the songs are what went wrong with the Hobbit movies.
You can't take a quest and turn it into a running away from a thing.
Yeah.
That's just anyway.
And the extended versions are just more songs. I'm not even kidding.
Just more songs. Yeah. I know. My husband cracked in the middle of one of the movies and accidentally laughed out loud and then said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And the guy down the front yelled, "We're all doing it, mate." And then the whole cinema went feral. Our podcast is forthcoming on the Hobbit movies. Patrick and Amie ask what went wrong. Do you tend a creative compost heap? Do you think about sort of what goes in?
I don't think about what goes in, but I know that it does. I mean, because Jonathan Lethem has addressed it in a different way. He calls it a sort of a stew, a kind of I forget the actual word he uses, but it's like we're all drawing from the same well. There is only so much, and there's only so many stories, and there's only so many ways to tell the stories. And so I'm absolutely conscious that we are all drawing from a well of Western literature, non-Western literature, what we've been taught, what we've picked up as adults, and that doesn't bother me. I'm not worried about that. Because I'm just constantly. I try to keep my reading tastes as non-snobby as possible. I try to read as widely as I can. By which I mean I try to keep my taste wide open, so that if it sounds interesting, I'm not going to look down on it because it's a graphic novel or a certain genre, etc. Although, God, I've had enough like American Civil War novels written by nice white Southerners about nice white Southerners who were really nice to their slaves. But I just try to keep my eyes open for just something that feels a little different. And I think, yeah, just keep cramming it in there. And that's where the creativity is going to come from. And it's funny because, and this is true, so Monster Calls is probably my best-selling book. And it's about a tree monster. And I had a lot of Hollywood interest in it, which is such a strange and very strange process. And I'm going to name drop here because it's important to the story. I'm not just name dropping. I will do that later. But I got on the phone with Steven Spielberg. And I had to say, because I didn't really want to talk about Monster Calls, I had to say that Poltergeist was a formative film for me when I was about 10 or 11 or 12. And I've literally seen it 30 or 40 times. And there was a point in my life when I could do almost the entire film verbatim. I loved Poltergeist so much. And it still holds up, by the way. It's still great. And he said, yeah, I had my own attacking tree in that. I went, oh my God. There is a scene in Poltergeist where the tree outside the house smashes through the windows.
Yep.
I was like, that's in my compost heap. And that's how it's come out. And I don't mind that. I don't think, I've plagiarized. I haven't.
Absolutely not, no.
Because I always say that a book is not a song. I said this in every event, so if you see me speak, you've heard me say this. A book is not a song. A book is the performance of a song.
Yeah.
So pick a good song, but people want to hear how you sing it. And that's what separates you from everybody else, is how you sing it.
Yeah.
And so I sang The Tree one way, he sang it another, and we're both fine. So.
Think of the performances we have seen of Alleluia over the years, the different artists
some real bad ones, yeah.
But many different ones.
Many different ones. I like the Rufus Wainwright version, I gotta say. That's my favorite, yeah.
So
I saw his musical, it's terrible. I mean, wow, it's a stinker.
Disappointment. Look,
yeah. And it was a big flop, and he blamed Brexit. It's like, yeah, British tastes just aren't sophisticated for experimental stuff. This is Brexit. I'm like, dude, you wrote a shitty show. It's anyway.
I mean, you would if Brexit was near you and something wasn't going well. Might pile on.
Yeah, it's why I'm not wearing a collared shirt. It's Brexit.
Yeah. So, some authors set out quite deliberately to write a book around a theme. Mm-hmm. Other authors, I am one of them, and I have a suspicion that you are also one of them, just set out to write and perhaps discover in the writing what the theme is. Where do you sort of sit on that? And do you find that there are themes that you come back to, or do you deal with something in a book and then sort of move on?
Well, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I deal with things in a book, because I don't use books as therapy, because I use therapy as therapy. And I also definitely do not set out with a theme.
Yeah.
I definitely don't, because then I think I'm writing a lesson, not a book. Yeah. And so I use the phraseology of I follow the story wherever the story goes. And that is, I think, decent as phraseology, but that has been used to cover a lot of crimes.
Sure.
Because in the history of writing, a lot of writers have just set out to write where the story goes, and the story has always led to a bunch of white people feeling angsty about something. And you think, well, that's not really the world, is it? That's not really the world as you see it. And so I think if I say that, I trust that if I have an idea that I'm really excited about, I trust that there is something in that idea that I'm responding to for a reason. And therefore, my accompanying responsibility when I'm just following the story where it goes is to actually look at the story and look at the world of the story and actually see what's there, not what I expect to see. Yeah. And I've always said that an artist can choose to look, or can look and choose not to write, but you cannot choose not to look. I mean, the good example here is Jane Austen. Jane Austen never wrote about sex. You're pretty sure she knew about it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So she looked and chose to not write about it, except, of course, she's writing about it all the way through.
Yeah.
But you cannot choose not to look. If you're choosing not to look, I don't think I can trust you to tell a truthful story. And so it's my responsibility, if I am going to follow a story just for itself, to see every fact about it and see everything that might make me uncomfortable and see everything that is absolutely true for it. And then I can safely say that I have told the truth the best I can. And I tend to recognize my themes in retrospect. I mean, I wrote like 7 books before someone said to me, you know they're all about how to survive at the end of the world, don't you? I'm like, oh, well.
I mean, now you say it.
Yeah, but that's fine by me.
Yeah.
That's really, really fine. I don't mind that in the slightest. Because I'm really just trying to tell the story that's in front of me, and if I'm excited about it, it's gonna have the things I care about. It's gonna have the themes I care about. It's gonna have the world that I care about and worry about and care for. So that's what writing is hard, and you stumble, but that's my sort of try to keep it as a guiding principle.
Yeah. All right. From those lofty heights.
Mm-hmm.
Down to the types of jokes that make small children laugh,
Mm-hmm.
which are perhaps the truest things of all, I guess, when I think about it. I want to talk about Chronicles of a Lizard Nobody, which I was saying to Patrick was a huge hit at our house. If you have a small human in your life, get it, because it is one of those rare joys that, as someone who spends a lot of time reading out loud to a small human, you get to enjoy it too. And that is, not to be ungenerous, not the case with all of the things that are produced for grown-ups to read to small humans. I've been conducting an exhaustive study now for a couple of years. So this, I mean, it was such a delight, but a new age range for you, and quite a different thing. What led you there?
I'm always, the ideas I'm responding to mostly are the ones that scare me the most, because I really feel like when I write something that there has to be a massive chance of failure, because it makes me pay attention. And it's also what I'm interested in, because I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to be complacent. I think complacency is creative death. I want to do something different, because I want to learn something different. I want to stretch something different. And God bless my publishers that they accept the weird stuff that I turn in. Although, having said that, because I've been asked the question about, like, I wrote 2 adult books and then thought my career was over, and got the idea for Knife of Never Letting Go. And so for my first 4 books for my publisher, I wrote the trilogy and A Monster Calls, which kind of won all the awards and then sold really well, which was really great. And I thought, I'm off the hook.
Great.
I don't have to prove anything to these people. Because if they complain about something, I go, yeah, really? You want to win another Carnegie? I mean, I don't say that.
But I mean, like, an alternate response to that would be, oh, God, this is finally what worked. I have to do more of this. I have, but we've seen the authors who have done that, who have thought, oh, I finally found safe ground. I'm going to...
Yeah, no, I just felt relief. I thought, oh my God, I don't have to prove myself anymore. I can write the weird shit I've always wanted to. And that's what I did. And
Rita, he did.
And so this was kind of the same. I wasn't expecting to write a middle grade book. They hadn't asked me for a middle grade book. They were not expecting a middle grade book. But I just had the idea. Chronicles of a Lizard Nobody is about a lizard called Zeke. And Zeke is a monitor lizard, which is what you in Australia commonly call goannas. But they are also called monitor lizards. Komodo draglins are a species of monitor lizard, et cetera, et cetera. There are a number of species of monitor lizards. Now, in American schools, there is a student volunteer position that is called a hall monitor. So you see where I'm going. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, hall monitor lizards. And I thought, that is way too stupid to ever be a book. And so I just laughed about it, because I think puns are the lowest form of comedy. And usually I hate them, and I'll kill you, especially egg puns. What is wrong with you people? But I thought, nah. And then I thought, oh, but then there's Zeke, isn't there? And then Zeke appeared, and Zeke's friends appeared, called Daniel and Alicia, and I thought, oh, I just love them, and there's a sweetness there.
Yeah.
And there's one of my ethos for the book is there's nothing funnier in the world than serious children, because I was a very serious child, and that they're so poignant and it's so funny. And so when I briefed the illustrator, Tim Miller, I said, no smiles. Mm-hmm. I said, think if Wes Anderson wrote a book for children. Yeah. It's all deadpan. They're all looking at the camera and they're very serious. Yeah. And so that's what the illustrations are. And I thought, oh, that makes me funny. And then I thought, what is he serious about? And so I kind of thought, well, what is his life like? And so it is truly, truly, truly no different for me than writing a YA book or an adult book. It's the same emotional investment. It's the same intellectual investment. It's the same work. To me, it's just sung in a different voice. That's truly the only difference. And I love them so much.
Yeah, and it gets right into the stuff that happens at school.
Yeah.
Like it's very, you talk about going into a situation and looking around and really seeing what's there.
Mm-hmm.
When you're small, it is serious, the stuff that's happening at school.
Very serious.
And, because it's your whole world. And you get into it. You get into what it is like to be at school and what it is like for these to be the biggest things.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, there are fewer, more unjust sentences in the world than you'll grow out of it. Because maybe you will, but not today, you won't. And you're living today. You're living right now. When you say you'll grow out of it, you're basically devaluing your child's present. And what is important in a day to a 6-year-old is, why is that less valuable than what's important to a 42-year-old? I mean, mainly because we put monetary value on the 42-year-old. But when you're 6 or when you're 8 or when you're 10, the world can end all the time. And he's an anxious lizard, and he's a big lizard, and he feels self-conscious about it, and somebody calls him fat, and he punches that someone. and as the next chapter says, which proved to be a huge mistake. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I am really trying to see. What is it really, really like for Zeke? What was it like for 10-year-old me?
Yeah.
And what wasn't I getting, and what kind of support wasn't I getting, and how did the world look? And the way kids look at the world is so funny and so heartbreaking and so amazing. And that's what I really wanted to look at. Like one of the characters, there's a bunch of characters, and one of the characters is a hawk.
Yes.
Called Miel, which means honey in French, and that's how he introduced himself. My name's Miel, it means honey. And Emile only speaks in all capitals because Hawks, he says, I'm sorry, I will try to lower my voice, but Hawks really cannot do that. And so he's constantly shouting all the time. And he rides the bus, and they're wondering, why is he riding the bus? And it turns out he's riding the bus because he's blind. So he takes the bus to school. And that came from, Emile, my name means honey, that just makes me laugh. A really tough sounding hawk called Honey. And it came from a place of little kids are absolutely amazing about visible disability. They want to know about it because they're really curious. And as soon as you explain it to them, they go, okay. And they
move on.
They slot it into what is normal.
Yeah.
Because it is normal.
Yeah.
And that to me is so funny and so amazing. Yeah. And so what's important about Miel is not that he's blind, it's that he's kind of shouty and a bit oversharey and really quite formal, but he's a really good friend, it turns out. And that kind of stuff it makes me excited to get to a page every day to see what they're going to do.
I mean, that's the best. The best reason to write something is you want to sit down every day. All right, so I'm guessing a number of you have read a number of Patrick's books, and so you will know what I mean when I say the vast majority of them are best encountered without too much context, without knowing too much about what is about to happen.
The dog dies.
Yeah, a choice that was made. I can't imagine you've heard about that from anyone, though.
No. Who here has never read one of my books? Why did you come? I know you came because your mom brought you, so that's fair enough. No, I'm just teasing. But yeah, go ahead. Yes. I thought you were going to say, if you've read my books, you know that I have one comedy and then 10 tomes of despair.
We should also flag that. Yeah. No, Lizard Nobody is not representative of the pack, shall we say. But, and also it is, but also it isn't. Yeah. So what I want to do is, I guess, talk a little about a bunch of your books.
No problem.
And sort of, instead of getting too deep into the plot, because I just never think it's very interesting, if nothing else, when people start going on about their plot. But I want to talk about sort of like some of the challenges or pleasures of writing them.
Problem.
So, Release.
Schönheit.
Release takes place over the course of just one day.
Yep.
It's a book about many things, but it's a book about how much can happen in just one day. And I guess what I wanted to ask about with that one is, in most books that we write, there are periods of time that get skipped. And, we wake up the next morning, a week later. When you're writing something that is set in such a short period of time, every moment becomes important. You know, every moment becomes something that you sort of have to bring up and look at and think about how it's affecting it.
Yep.
So was that fun? Was that challenging? How did that go?
I did it purposely for the challenge.
Okay.
Release is that one. And it is inspired by two different, wildly different novels. One is Mrs. Dalloway, which to me is one of the three greatest English language novels, the other two being Beloved and Middlemarch, all coincidentally by women. And Mrs. Dalloway is absolutely stunning. It is set over the course of a single day. It has a famous opening line, which is she would get the flowers herself. And it has a famous closing line, which is closer, he said, and there she was. And it's set over the course of a day, which I'll send you home with some trivia. That is called diurnal. That is called a diurnal novel, by the way, and as opposed to nocturnal, etc. And I thought, what a challenge. What a fantastic creative challenge, because I feel like I'm pretty good with plot, and I'm good with big-scale plot. And I thought, I want to take away that safety net. I want to take away the safety net of relying on and then.
Yeah.
And so I thought, yeah, that's terrifying. Let's do that. And the other book that it's based on, especially I thought because one day in the life of a teenager could be such an intense way to get across the teenage experience. And then the other book that it's inspired by is Judy Blume's Forever. Anybody read that? Yeah. So you know what I mean. Judy Blume's Forever is a very specifically famous book in that it is the book written in 1974, so 50 years ago, that absolutely blew the doors off depictions of sexuality and sex in a teenage book. And if you read it now, it's still eye-opening, because it is very graphic.
It is the book that if you take it off the shelf in the school library and hold it like this, it'll fall open to a particular page.
Yeah, because everybody's really... But what's more than that, it is very, 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 very graphic.
Yeah.
But it's joyous.
Yeah.
It is without cynicism. It's without judgment. It is Judy Blume saying, you are a valuable, beautiful human being, and the things that you want to do are beautiful and not shameful. And I had always heard and read, Forever, and I'd always thought, this is great, but there will never be a version for me. There will never be a version for a boy who likes boys.
Yeah.
Because we are taught nothing but shame. And so I thought, well, I want to do this Mrs. Dalloway thing, and I want to do a version of Forever for the teenager that I was, and what he needed. Because queer kids die of shame. It kills us. It kills us. Which is why I'm so loud on social media, particularly about trans rights, and why it appears in some of my books like Different for Boys is the same. Because if I can tell someone that, no, you are beautiful and what you do is beautiful and there is no shame in it, if I can maybe keep someone alive, then what better purpose is there to writing? And that makes it sound heavy, but it's that's where Release came from. Those two burning ideas, a real wish to write a book that 15-year-old me would have went, oh my God, people do this, and it's smoking. But also with the then technical creative challenge of, can you do it all in one day? Yeah. And that is exactly the kind of jam that I look at a book and go, yeah, let's try that. And that makes me really excited. So that's where Release came from.
Yeah. Well, as someone who is in the middle of editing a diurnal novel at the moment,
it's
what a
challenge.
Choice,
yeah,
right?
It's not easy. Yep.
Choices were made. I could talk about Release for a long time, but I'm not going to because I want to get on to the others.
Read it. It's smutty.
Yeah, there you go. And meaningful. So I want to talk about illustrations a bit. And the book that I would automatically come at it through is probably And the Ocean Was Our Sky, which, for those who have not, it's what if Moby Dick was told by the whale and therefore you didn't know the whole story in the version that we currently have. It's illustrated by Rowena Kai.
A Melbourne-based artist.
Indeed. And, I mean, you've worked with an illustrator plenty of times now. And I think when we look at picture books, we have this sort of assumption that the text will tell part of the story and the pictures will tell part of the story. But that's not always the case with books for older children. Sometimes it's just, here's a picture of something that is happening. Have you been able to collaborate with your illustrators, or how much have you been able to influence that?
I am very lucky to have a really good art director at Walker Books who, and we have talked about it because I think that it's hard to talk about because I don't want to look like sort of American monster. But I think that
they all came to see you. They're predisposed to
American monsters.
Be generous.
Because I think that if you are a writer, I think that timidity is your absolute enemy. I think it is an act of hubris to write and then expect somebody to take a huge slice of their life to read what you've written. And so, by God, you better be good. And so I think you can lack confidence in everything in your life. I lack confidence in many, many, many things. But when my writing is working, I am not lacking in confidence about it because I want it to work. Because when I read a book, I want to trust the writer is going to take me all the way to the end and not mess it up. Yeah. And every good novel is that. At the moment I'm reading The Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk, who won the Nobel Prize a couple years ago. And it's a 17th century novel about a Polish potential messiah. I'm like, that has nothing to do with my life, and I am absolutely spellbound. And that's what I mean. You need mojo, you need welly, you need hubris. And so when I go into any book, I think, how can I push? How can I, in addition to what I've written, because it cannot be instead of, because you can't just do an experiment. Those are easy. Experiments are easy. An experiment that still moves you is much harder. And so when I'm thinking about illustrations and I'm talking to the publisher and I'm saying, what can we get away with? What can we do? And what isn't normally done? And what can we change? And that goes back to the trilogy with all the typography, with the noise. Mm-hmm. That was all in my manuscript. For Monster Calls, the art director found Jim Kay. And I didn't get to talk to Jim Kay until the book was done because they don't like us talking directly to each other.
They think we'll get ideas and try to grab the steering wheel.
And totally miss the deadline, I think.
Yes.
So like there are illustrations in A Monster Calls that literally go on for 11 pages. Yeah. And I love that. Yeah. I love that in a book. And The Ocean Was Our Sky, it's a bigger size. There are pages and pages in a row where there's no dialogue. It's just Rovina's amazing art. And that's where it comes from. It comes from, why not? Mm. It's like I said this before, it's like Drag Race. It's this now is your opportunity. Right now. You leave it on the stage now, today. Otherwise, when? What are you waiting for? And so that's kind of where I come from with illustrators. And I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's do something. Let's go make ruckus. Let's do a wild rumpus,
Yeah.
And don't ask permission. Don't ask permission. Say, this is what it is. Isn't it great? Isn't this journey that I'm going to take you on fantastic? Yeah. It's kind of liberating. It sounds obnoxious, but I don't mean it in any way kind of obnoxious. It is really just, how excited are you? And don't be afraid to share it. And don't be afraid to be ambitious. Really don't. You might not hit the moon, but you might hit something spectacular on the way, is my feeling.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The stuff I've had that has met the greatest readership has always been the stuff where we just got very ambitious and very cocky and wrote it entirely for the parts of ourselves that were delighted by it.
I mean, Twilight is a terrible, terrible, terrible book. But when you read it, she's writing all of those. The secret of Twilight is that she wrote down all those things that all the stories we tell ourselves just as we're falling to sleep, where we're the hero and everybody loves us even though we're shy.
Yeah.
She wrote it down.
Yeah, I mean,
and
fair play.
Yeah, exactly, fair play. And so if you are a writer, you can be timid in every other aspect of your life, and I don't mean being a dick either. But take me somewhere. And I want to believe you. I am ready to believe you. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to move on to a new book.
Okie doke.
I'm going to move on to The Rest of Us Just Live Here.
Okie doke.
Which for those who, again, have not, it is a book about the ones who are not the chosen ones, the ones who are, ducking all the fantastical shit that's going on at school and just trying to finish chemistry while, everyone else is fighting vampires and so on. The way I want to come into this book is to talk about the idea that it is possible to really love something, in this case YA, and still want to poke a little gentle, affectionate fun at it.
Yep.
And I think there's a real distinction between poking affectionate fun at it and just poking fun at it.
Yeah.
But this is certainly one where you poke a little affectionate fun. I don't know, is satire the right word? Is that how you would? Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah.
The problem I have with some satire is that it's heartless, and
That's why I'm hesitating,
Yeah.
because this is not.
yeah, and heartless satire is funny to a point, but I can never really
Stay
go
in
to
it,
the end
yeah.
because I'm like, why should I care?
Yeah.
And so this came about because I was joking with the author Juno Dawson about how chosen one narrative heroes always have such stupid names in YA. They're always Katniss, and Bella. And I said, what about Mike?
Yeah.
Why doesn't Mike get a book? And so it's basically the book of Mike. The hero is called
Yeah.
Mike, and they live in a world where there are chosen ones, and the chosen ones have ludicrous names like Satchel, and there are so many of them that are called Finn that they have to number them, and so what I did was I did the old Victorian novel thing where I had chapter headings, and there was chapter the first in which, and so like a chapter summary before Dickens used to do sometimes. And the chosen one story where they're fighting this incursion of the immortals coming in is all told in just the chapter heading. And then the chapter completely ignores it because it's the life of Mike. And you see that story happening just in the background and not really affecting them. And that felt to me like such a teenage thing.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling of not belonging that it's not that you aren't even going to be volunteering for the Hunger Games. You're probably not hungry. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what about those kids? And what? Not the cliche of it's the extraordinary and the ordinary, but why were their stories any worse, or any less interesting or any less good? And so we do ultimately come to understand there's a key moment where they realize that the chosen ones suffer a lot, and that to me is a real poignant moment where they're like, oh wow, their lives must stink to be chosen. It must be awful, and. So yeah, I really love that book. I really, really love that book.
Yeah, I enjoyed the chapter headings enormously, and you've led me nicely into something else I want to talk about, which is because you have these little elements of your books that are quite meta. You've got, the chapter headings that are sort of commenting on the type of adventure that we would see if we were in the chosen ones. In Lizard Nobody, we've got little footnotes saying, "Don't worry, we'll explain about France later."
Yeah.
And you will have to read it if you want to learn about France, and you do. I'm also thinking about, say, Different for Boys.
Mm-hmm.
So at the start of Different for Boys, it opens with swearing and various bits of the sentences are completely blacked out, like they're being censored. Again, something which my readers know I enjoy doing enormously in my books, so I immediately went to this. And what's fun about it is the characters notice and they start experimenting. They start, imagine if it's a movie, someone's like, hey, I wonder if I can say beep. Guess not. And so, they play with it and they also protest it and they go, but this is how we talk.
Yep.
Could you talk a little about, I guess, sort of balancing, them addressing us and yet still being in their own story?
Well, there's two things about that. One is that another of my core philosophies is that there's no such thing as realism, or there's no such thing as a realistic novel. Every novel is a fantasy, even if it looks like our world and is a simulacrum of our world. It's still a fantasy. Characters still arc to their destinies. There's still coincidences. It's still words on a page making a universe. And so I always thought that if I can embrace that, then why not really go out there? Or why not? Because all that needs to happen in any book of any kind, whether it's Carl Ove Nausgaard talking about his cereal for 900 pages, or it's some weird, one of my little weird things, it's all fantasy. It's all just words on a page. And if I can embrace that, then all I need to do is make a world where my story can logically take place, and that's all I have to do. And like, there's some really weird stuff in Chronicles of a Lizard Nobody that I treat with dead seriousness, and that to me is, one, it's funny, but also two, it's a story. And so for things like the meta stuff, again, the challenge is not to do meta. The challenge is to do meta and still make it impactful and still make it moving and still make it funny and so on. But I think we all know it's fiction. Right. We know it's fake. And our agreement with it is that we will see ourselves in it and still recognize some truth. Yeah. So I think a reader knows. A reader is smart.
Yeah, and so, that if you keep it, so long as you have your internal consistency.
Internal consistency is everything.
They will step into whatever it is that you've invited them into.
Yep, and I cannot stress internal consistency as everything, because your universe has to be logical and follow its own rules. And so those kind of things makes me laugh. And I loved them as a reader when I was a kid. Yeah. And the challenge is, it becomes a satirical challenge, because the Different for Boys came from the idea that we could never write how teenagers talk because we could never publish it. Yeah. Because they are obscene little bastards. And if you read anything a teenager's written lately, it's way darker than anything we'd be allowed to publish. Yep. And so I thought, that's funny. And so I thought, I'll use that, because Different Voice came from, it was started out in an anthology. God, I'm really talking a lot. It started out in an anthology about losing your virginity. And so I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Because as a society, we have one single definition of losing your virginity, which is basically the definition of the word heteronormative. Mm-hmm. And I thought, so what does it mean if you're a boy who likes boys? When do you lose your virginity, and who gets to decide? And so he starts the book by saying, okay, well, here are all the things I've done. And most of them are blacked out. Yeah. He says, well, but then the question becomes, well, so when did I lose my virginity?
Where was the line? Yeah. If there was.
And who says so? Who decides? Yeah. And then I thought, the more I thought about this, and the more I thought about the black box, which is a satirical thing about what teenagers are allowed to say, the boxes are also a representation of the closet. Of things you're not allowed to share with anybody, or things you choose not to share with anybody. And then I thought, that's really something, because the closet is a poisonous place. And no one should ever have to be in one. And yet we still keep people in the closet, because we have expectations, even if they're beneficent, we still have expectations for our children. And so, it became meatier and meatier. And that, to me, is where the challenge and the fun is. Yeah. Not doing something, not just making a joke, but can you make it do more?
Yeah. Well, and I don't know what your experience has been, but I can only imagine you, as I have had many books banned, and I'll tell you what they've never been banned for in my books, which is excessive violence.
I have actually been banned for excessive violence, yeah. And in America too, I thought, God.
I have one where there's brain fragments on the camera through which the characters are being observed. Yeah. And what people got mad about was the gay kiss. And I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, that's another. Okay.
There have always been and always will be renegade librarians and teachers who will do their best to save the lives of LGBTQ kids. Yeah. And long may they live.
And we will give them the stories with which to attempt.
100%. I'm not going to stop. Right.
We're going to be coming to you guys in a minute, but I want to ask about... So you have recently, with the Chaos Walking books, you have recently announced that you are going back some 15 years after it wrapped up. Piper at the Gates of... if anyone is learning this live, then great news. Piper at the Gates of Dusk is going to be coming out about 15 years after it wrapped, and in-world, insofar as time is experienced in the same way.
Maybe a little bit longer.
About 20 years in-world, right? What's it been like going back?
It's not a continuation, because Chaos Walking is a trilogy where a story I wanted it to end, and it ends where I wanted it to end. Yeah. It's set in the world of. The main character is called Ben, and he's named after his grandfather, which is an Easter egg, so you know who his parents are. And I honestly just had the idea. I never planned on going back. Never, ever, ever. And I thought, that story's done. I'm happy. I want to move on to other things. And it's terrifying in the right kind of way.
Well, I mean, if you want to write scared, it's a new challenge,
right? It is absolutely a new challenge, because it's it's the opposite of relaxing. It's, there's a lot of pressure, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. So I'm working. It's coming. I'm working.
Yeah, and I'm not going to press you too much on it because I know talking about it while it's happening.
Oh, I wouldn't anyway. So yeah.
You're knitting the parachute on the way down. You don't want someone to start pointing out where you may have dropped a stitch.
Yep.
So the final thing I want to ask about is
Libra.
I'm sorry. Okay, you all laughed and I missed what you said.
I said Libra. I'm a Libra. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then thank you for coming. No, I want to ask about A Monster Calls.
Okay.
And I want to come at it kind of via the screenplay adaptation, because when we're writing a book, we're often quite inside the character's head, or at least psychically very close to them. When the story kind of leaves the page and goes up on the screen, some of that sort of internal stuff has to translate in some other way for the viewer to be able to enjoy it. And I wanted to ask about your experience of sort of translating the internal to the external.
Well, I had a really good director.
Yeah.
And that's where collaboration is the best, where it's someone who could bring stuff that I would never dream of, and I bring stuff that he could never dream of, and together we make something better.
Yeah.
And that's that. It's interesting because you said when it leaves the page, and that is actually something I don't believe. It doesn't leave the page because the book remains.
It absolutely does.
And that's what I've always said about movies. When I talk to schools, I say I've had 2 movies made of my books: one good movie, one bad movie, and
it's about the odds.
Yeah, but I know there's. I'm still. Are you kidding? I'll go
You've
50-50.
Right?
Yeah, but I'll still go for 50-50 on quality. It's more than most authors get, and but the book remains.
Yeah.
The book is not erased by a film. It's a remix of the film, and so that was my attitude. And I wrote A Monster Calls because the screenplay, because I had these Hollywood conversations, and I started to get this feeling of how they would change it in ways that I thought would rob it of its power.
Yeah. And
so in a magnificent act of hubris, looking back, I cannot believe I did this. I said, I'll write it myself. And it's not
safest hands.
Yeah, and I thought, and my genuine thought was, I'm not a filmmaker, but I would at least like to start the conversation.
Yeah.
And say, this is what I believe. Yeah. What do you believe? And to my great astonishment, it worked. And that was an amazing experience. It's one of the best creative experiences I've ever had. I learned so much. It was so much fun. I'm so proud of that movie.
Yeah.
And then there's Chaos Walking, which is fine.
Win some, lose some, hey?
You win some, lose some. That's okay. I'm really fine about it.
Yeah.
I tell the story. I know we got a good question. I tell the story about when Chaos Walking was announced that it was actually going to production. I was in Germany doing some events, and a German girl asked, "What will you do if it's not any good?" And I said, "Is that what happened to you when Hollywood made a $100 million film of your best-selling novel?" And she went, "That was not very nice." And I was like, "Well, now that was the question, honey, Fraulein." But my larger point being, how can I complain?
Right.
How can I complain?
My diamond shoes are too tight.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's a let's say a famous YA author who tweeted a couple months ago about how signing so many tip-in pages was hurting his back. I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's one for the group chat.
Yeah.
Is what that is.
Yeah, you don't put that online.
No.
So I'm so lucky. Are you kidding me? Please. I was this weirdo gay kid raised in a Christian forest in Washington State.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky to be here.
It's going better than expected. Is what I'm hearing.
It's all cake. I'm telling you. So.
All right. We're going to go to questions, and the way we do it is you guys stick your hands in the air, and whoever the people holding the mics think is the most enthusiastic, they win. While a mic moves around, Patrick, I always like to ask, have you read, and this always makes me forget the name of every book I've ever read, but have you read anything lately that if you could get the audience to pick something up, what would it be?
I have forgotten everything I've recently read.
Yeah, that always happens, so I don't know why I'm doing it to you when it always happens to me.
I really have forgotten stuff. I've read good stuff this year, and I've completely
We can circle back to it if you
want. Yeah, completely forgotten all of it, literally.
All right, is someone holding a microphone?
I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about boys or men processing anger and the need for release, because I just finished Release, and A Monster Calls is also a little bit about that, and I feel like there's a common thread between both of them, and the need to talk about it.
It's I'm absolutely not a psychologist, and I would feel uncomfortable advocating for a program of action. But I find so much, the boys in those stories are basically me. And I'm looking at what, I'm trying to look honestly at unexpressed emotion. And I hate to make a sweeping generalization about, boys are taught to do it less. I think they are, but I mean, that's not a useful generalization. Also, I'm Scandinavian, and we're Stoic, which does not mean unemotional, it means privately emotional, and the costs of that. And so I don't have an answer for it, but it does come out somewhere, and it will. And that's not a has to or must do or should do, it does. And so the question is really, how is the healthiest way? How's the best way? And how's the safest way? Now, not just for society, for the expression of a boy's anger, but for the boy. And so I'm just trying to, my stories tend to try to find ways of expressing that deep emotion and looking at what happens when it's expressed. Because Monster Calls, the fulcrum of the story is him destroying his grandmother's sitting room. That's the center of the story. That's the first idea I had. And that release of it, the transgression of it, and the irreparability of it is something, is the whole point of the story. He's not getting what he needs. And why not? Because we're not telling him the truth. And so I'm just trying to explore it. I really don't have an answer. I mean, thank you for asking about it, but I cannot prescribe to you because I'm still grappling it with myself.
All right. Who has got our microphone next?
Could you please explain the rhinoceroses? In your first book, you have a crash of rhinoceroses running through a city. And in your most recent book, you have your author picture drawn as a rhinoceros.
I do.
And there are rhinoceroses all through all of your books. So can you please explain?
Not entirely all, because it became a thing. It became like Haruki Murakami and his cats, and people started looking for them. So I thought, I will leave one out of this one. It's literally, I love rhinoceros. I have a tattoo of a rhinoceros. There is something, anthropomorphizing wildly, there is something about the self-confidence of a rhino that I think is ideal. I'm not vegetarian, but they're vegetarian. They're massive. They could easily stomp you to death, but they won't unless you bother them. Yeah, a rhinoceros does not need you to be small for it to be big. And that to me is the best kind of confidence, where I don't need to make you less than me so that I can feel bigger. That's my ideal. I love rhinoceros, and they're endangered, and they're incredible looking, and they are badly abused in Gladiator 2.
So I heard that.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I just wanted to ask you, as someone who is hoping to one day publish a book, what is a basic, what's a basic rule that you might have for someone who's struggling to write?
Write a book you want to read yourself, because you'd be amazed at how many people don't. And I mean, however weird a book you want to write, that you think nobody's going to want to read that. Again, I give you Twilight. The people are going to want to read what you are most excited about, no matter how strange, how esoteric, how unusual it is. I am genuinely dead serious. So many young writers try to guess what the market wants. Or so many young writers I can write like that person because they've been published. And nobody was looking for the first Hunger Games. And nobody was looking for the first How to Train Your Dragon. Write what you want to read yourself. I cannot stress that enough. Because your joy is going to be on the page, and we're going to respond to your joy. More than we'll respond to your story, probably, because we're going to know that you are having a hell of a time writing it, and we'll take you to the end. But having said that, in practical terms, I was writer in residence for a charity called Book Trust, just one word, Book Trust. And they asked me to write a bunch of writing tips. And I don't know how useful writing tips are, but what I did is I wrote down a lot of things that I do for how to start a story and how to write a second chapter. And so I did a lot of practical advice, if that's useful. So take what is useful and ignore the rest, because it's all different. But set aside the expectation that I have to write this because that's what will get me published. truly set that aside. And the story you want to tell is what's going to get you published, I promise you.
Yeah.
There's a couple people up front who are being harshly ignored.
Wow. While we
the
come
microphone,
down,
yeah.
you know, on the subject of people, of if you write your weird things, there'll be enough people out there who love it. There's a great line from an Australian band called the Whitlams that goes, "She was 1 in a million, so there's 5 more just in New South Wales." And, you know, there's a lot of people out there as weird as you about your weird thing. There really are. Yeah. Having also written some real weird stories.
Who's got the microphone?
So we have 2. So we have one down there.
Okay.
Next, and then...
All right, go for it in the back.
Hello. Thank you for your very joyous talk. I had a question about running. You mentioned that a lot of your characters are basically you, and I remember reading that there was a lot of running, and I just imagined you running and writing, and I wanted to know more about, you know, if there's a relationship between your writing and your running.
I'm a runner. I'm a distance runner. I haven't run properly in about a year because I have a torn meniscus, which I'm going to have surgery on in January. It hurts like a mother, let me tell you. Running is my not writing, and I think every author needs one, something that is not writing. It helps when you're blocked. It helps when you're procrastinating. It helps when you're frustrated. It's something that is not the page. And running is great for me because I'm not so good at sitting down and meditating, but running is very meditative. And it's rhythmic. My breathing becomes rhythmic. I have really, really severe OCD, and running is a great sport for people with OCD because the goals and the improvements are easy and measurable. So it's a lot of things for me. The running is my refuge. And it's been difficult to not be able to run this past year. But that's really all it is. It's just my version of whatever not writing is. And I really think you all should have one. And it can be anything. I mean, I like the idea that running for me is physical so that I can be not in my head if I don't want to be. And then when I'm done, what do you know? I usually have an idea or two. And it's funny how that works because I've stepped away from the writing and the page. So that's all. There's nothing mystical about running. It's just my bit of mystical, really. You'll have your own. But running is great. And I love how everyone who doesn't run complains about running constantly. So that's fine. That's fine. You just die younger than me. That's fine.
Hello. Hi. First, I just want to say thank you for fighting for trans people on your social media. I see it all the time, and as a trans person, it makes me feel very welcome as someone who religiously reads your books. And my favorite book of yours is Release, and I wanted to know if the main character, like the inspiration for him, also came from the book inspirations that you mentioned earlier, or if he was kind of separate from that at all.
Is he me, is what you're asking?
Well,
yeah, I mean, he kind of is. I mean, he is and he isn't. He's got his father as a minister, and which is not my father. I am very lucky that I love my father, and we've always gotten along, which is very unusual for a drill sergeant, evangelical Christian, Republican, and his gay son. So I'm quite lucky there. My mother, on the other hand. But there are all, essentially, I think every decent novel is autobiographical in a way, because it's everything that I care about, so every character is me. But Adam Thorne's direct experience is not exactly mine, but I have enough in there, certainly to work from, and I absolutely know those feelings, and I know, again, it's the poison of the closet. It's the terror of the closet, and it's the shame of it, and the casual cruelty of a parent who would like to keep you there sometimes, and the thing that makes me most angry is a parent who says, "I love you in spite," not "I love you because." And that to me is unbelievably damaging. And if that is how you feel about your child, you shouldn't have had children. It makes me very, very angry. And that comes up in my books a lot. Parents of queer kids fail them constantly, so do better. I am looking at you all in the audience. Do better. Because your kids will die if you don't. I don't have a funny line about that because I'm being serious.
No. I don't know. I think I'm just giving it space to breathe for a minute because there's the urge to hop onto something else. But actually, I think maybe let's sit with that as our final comment.
Fine, good
So
for me. Good by
we've
me.
reached past. So before you all break into applause for Patrick,
Because you're gonna.
you know they are. What I want to say is, I'm going to suggest that we all work as a unit, and what we're going to do is stay in our seats and let Patrick get down to the back, where he will be signing for you.
I will run like an antelope.
With a torn meniscus.
Yeah, I won't. I will hobble like a rhinoceros.
And then once he is down the back, absolutely feel free to. You're beyond my control at that point. Swarm him as you must. I will be loitering around, but you are Melburnians, and I think I have probably signed all your books, so I will just be chit-chatting. But before we send him to run, hobble, or do whatever's going to happen down to the back, can you please thank Patrick Ness for coming to Melbourne?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Amie. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.